Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Nostalgic Blast Reviews. This is the show where we review the best and worst in gaming, and this episode, guys, is going to be one of the more nostalgic games that I've talked about recently, similar to the Pokemon Emerald review I did. Pokemon Leaf Green was a game that I grew up playing. It was right in that sweet spot where Pokemon was still relatively new when this game released back in 2004 on the Gameboy Advance. Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green are both remakes of the original Gen 1 games, Pokemon Red and Blue, that originally released back in 1996. I grew up playing Generation 3 as my first major generation, like I described in the Pokemon Emerald review, and Pokemon Leaf Green was also among the first Pokemon games that I ever personally played. This is a review today that's going to be extremely nostalgic for me. Of course, any critiques that I have about the game I'll remove my nostalgia shades for, but if I'm being honest, guys, Pokemon Leaf Green, which is the game that I grew up playing, not really so much Fire Red, I can tell you right now is a fantastic Pokemon game, and for their first real attempt at remaking any game in one of the most iconic series or franchises of all time, they nailed so many things right with Pokemon Leaf Green on the GBA. Leaf Green, visually speaking, looks fantastic on the Game Boy Advance. Considering what they were working with when they remade Red and Blue from the original Game Boy, this game just pops with personality, color, and amazing sprite work. This game features an extensively awesome color palette. Each building, each blade of grass, each character model and Pokemon that you encounter in each different town or city, from Pallet Town all the way to the Indigo Plateau, where you fight the Elite Four. Everything is just brimming with detail and life. The sprite work looks fantastic. The color palette and the shading is just amazing, making each location distinct in its own way. The pixel art looks fantastic, whether it be animations in battle, the designs of the Pokemon, even the little details like when you're looking at your Pokédex. It's just a fantastic looking game. And considering the fact that they were working with original Game Boy hardware when remaking this one, it just looks fantastic. From the colors to the sprite work, visually it looks fantastic. The soundtrack as well, while I don't think it's the strongest soundtrack in the Pokemon series or compared to other video games, it's not the best soundtrack ever made, but this is absolutely a classic, and it's really good in its own right. There's a lot of tracks that I love in this game, from the town themes to the main Pokemon theme, to the moment where you're approaching the Indigo Plateau and taking on all the Elite Four members. There's just a lot of really good music in this game as well. And given the fact, again, this is the most classic Pokemon game you can play, the music here is just captivated by that old, nostalgic music that a lot of people can relate to when they picked up and played these games for the first time, making you feel like a kid again, hearing this fantastic soundtrack. The visuals and the music were absolutely nailed for this one, and there's no complaints from me. Pokemon really isn't known for that much. It's the in-depth storytelling. Now, I personally think in terms of Pokemon media, the Pokemon Adventures manga is probably the best story Pokemon has ever produced in any media. But when it comes to the video games, they did eventually start creating more in-depth stories, starting with Gen 3 with Hoenn, continuing on with Sinnoh, definitely with Unova. They explored a lot of essential themes, characters, villains, that kind of thing, in addition to your usual goal of becoming the champion and taking down a bad guy team for the games. But the original games, in the case of Leaf Green, it sticks to that tried and true classic formula to where there isn't really a story present here. You have multiple encounters with Team Rocket and their boss Giovanni, where you go and defeat them. You go and battle the gym leaders and earn badges. Eventually make your way to the Elite Four and defeat your rival and become the champion. That is pretty much the main premise of the story, and it's such a classic formula that worked well for the Pokemon series, given this is a remake of the original game. While there really isn't an in-depth story to really talk about, this formula works well for the game, because everything is structured around it. It's the first Pokemon game. This is the first 150 Pokemon available to you. There's a classic journey that allows you to become the champion and try and collect them all in order to gather all the data for the Pokédex. Now, normally that's where the story recap would kind of end, given the fact that it's a simple video game story by Pokemon standards especially. But Leaf Green and Fire Red, because these were remakes, had additional content added to them, where you had the Sevii Islands arc, where in addition to the main region of Kanto, once you talked to Bill at a certain point in the game, you had access to the Sevii Islands. 7 distinct islands outside of the Kanto region that presented a side story of sorts, where you got to fight Team Rocket again in the aftermath of Giovanni's defeat, team up with Lorelei of the Elite Four at one point, and ultimately recover some precious gems that allowed you some now disabled Game Boy Advance connection access. It wasn't anything too in-depth in terms of a story either. It did do well to set up Generation 2 for Gold and Silver, kind of bridging that gap to explain why Team Rocket was active a few years later. While it isn't anything in-depth, it's still some pretty cool extra content, unique dialogue, unique story moments, and a cool encounter with another character like Lorelei from the Elite Four. Once again, nothing in-depth, but the fact that this game had added story content for the remake and unique locations with Pokemon exclusive from other generations at the time that you really didn't see anywhere else in Kanto, it made for a pretty cool post-game story as well. So, while the story, once again, isn't anything in-depth, given the fact this is the original Pokemon formula, it works extremely well for the type of game this is, and the post-game content with the Sevii Island stuff is solid too. Honestly, when we're comparing it to a lot of other games in the gameplay department, this is the tried and true classic Pokemon formula. If you played any game in this series, or you've played any kind of turn-based RPG, you know exactly what to expect. You choose your starter at the beginning of the game, grab Pokeballs, catch Pokemon, raise their level and their stats in order to defeat trainers, the gym leaders, and the Elite Four. Purchase items from the Pokemart like you would in any other RPG. You have hold items that allow your Pokemon to actually be able to use in battle to power up moves. They introduce abilities in this one where your Pokemon has an ability such as if they're a water type and they're low in health, their water attacks will power up. They had a lot of unique gameplay features in this remake that carried over from the Gen 3 games. And overall, for the gameplay department, it's pretty much what you would expect. I really don't need to explain the Pokemon formula that in depth, because pretty much I would imagine all of you watching this have at least heard of this series if you've never played any one of the classic mainline games. This formula works extremely well. The gameplay is very fun. Collecting all the original Pokemon and reading about the data entries in the Pokédex is very fun. Exploration around each one of the towns, talking to unique NPCs, and seeing just a really good cast of gym leaders in this region is just fantastic to see. It's structured extremely well in the gameplay. The progression is really cool. The fact that you are able to backtrack and be able to catch Pokemon later in the game is really nice, and the overall gameplay of being able to control Pokemon and fight them one-on-one in the battles like you usually would. Once again, nothing in depth for me to talk about. The gameplay is really good in this game too. It's about as classic as you could possibly get. Functions exactly how you would expect for both a Pokemon game and a classic turn-based RPG, with leveling up, taking down opponents by reducing their HP, buying items to restore health and their power points and all that stuff, which would be the equivalent of mana in actual RPGs. Overall, the gameplay, what I can solidly say, since this doesn't require too much depth, is that it's really good and works extremely well for Leaf Green, and it just looks better to boot. Once again, given the remake. And that's all I have to say about Pokemon Leaf Green on the Game Boy Advance, guys. This video has been nothing but praise for the entirety of the game, and that's because I really don't have any major issues with it. Sure, I can nitpick a few things about it. The fact that the fact that the Sevii Islands content wasn't more in-depth in terms of a story. They didn't include enough areas maybe at the end. The progression throughout the Kanto region is not the best, just given the fact you have to randomly go around locations at one point in the game, and you have some stupid reason where guards are thirsty and they won't let you through to some of the main cities that you could have just as easily gone through without having to travel off some excess routes. But to be honest, that's really just minor nitpicks in the design, rather than taking away actual criticism from a very well done video game. Pokemon Leaf Green looks amazing, has an amazing soundtrack, has the tried and true Pokemon gameplay formula here that started right here within this generation that works very well. While the story isn't anything too in-depth, it works well for the games and has some cool post-game content with the Sevii Islands stuff. I really don't have any massive issues with this game, which goes to show how well that Generation 1, and especially these remakes, have held up even after over 20 years. The fact of the matter is, this is the definitive way to play Pokemon Generation 1. The original Game Boy games are classic, but have a lot of issues. The Let's Go stuff with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is cool, has some updated visuals, but they really don't do anything to improve the story, including a worse rival, and the gameplay is dumbed down quite a bit for the Pokemon Go aesthetic, which I really don't think is the definitive way to play Gen 1. If you've never experienced this before, or you're looking for a good way to play Gen 1, or maybe you're just looking for a good way to go back and replay the Kanto journey, go and check out Pokemon Leaf Green on the Game Boy Advance and Fire Red. Both games are fantastic in their own right. They're classic Pokemon games, and once again, I feel like they are the definitive way to replay the start of one of the biggest series of all time. And that's all I have for this one, guys. Thank you very much for checking out this review of Pokemon Leaf Green. This was fantastic to go back into, to talk about a game that I absolutely loved from my childhood. One of the first Pokemon games I played, one of my favorite video game series of all time. And quite frankly, it's just a well put together classic game that they really won't find anymore nowadays. I highly recommend you check out Pokemon Leaf Green or Fire Red if you've never experienced it before, as I truly do believe this is the best way to play the first generation of Pokemon. That being said, though, guys, let me know what you guys think about Pokemon Leaf Green in the comment section down below. Do you love this game? Do you feel like it's weaker in comparison to some of the Pokemon games? Do you have any fond, nostalgic memories of playing it whenever you were a kid? Let me know your thoughts on it and Pokemon in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy the video, give it a like, and subscribe to the channel if you guys want to catch future content with video game reviews, collaborations, collection pickups, and everything else we do here for gaming nostalgia. That being said, once again, this has been Ryan from the Nostalgia Factor saying, keep on gaming.